Thank you for joining Let's Meet Where We Eat, conversations with innovation and entrepreneurship leaders who specialize in food and nutrition. Our series is presented by Nourish Cafe and the Food and Nutrition Innovation Institute at the Tufts Friedman School for Nutrition Science and Policy. Enjoy. Our institute is a consortium of, nearly 100, more than 100, a lot of people, from big food companies, small food companies, big nonprofits, small nonprofits, startups of all sizes and venture capitalists, as well as partnerships with our Friedman School faculty and staff here at the Tufts University Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. So that group that we have, the Food Nutrition Innovation Institute Leadership Council, of which our guest speaker today is on, we have events for ourselves. We do internal things, and if you're not on the council and you're interested in being a part of those, let us know. But one of the things we started doing is saying to our members, hey, for people who aren't part of our internal world, if any of you want to host an external facing event with us, let's do it, because Namali and Dr. Yum are amazing. So Bright Seed last week, they're incredible. We don't want to hide the treasure that are these people. We want to use the microphone to amplify. And so this is our way of centering and amplifying voices on our council that we think the greater world and community would really love to hear and see. So we've been fans of Dr. Yum and Namali's work for a long time. We think her theory of change is profound. And we're really excited today to have her share with you her perspective. My understanding is, Namali, there's some updated perspectives and new things going on. And it's always so refreshing to hear through your lens where we're headed. And I think to all give us hope and assurances that we're headed in the right direction. I want to shout out really quickly to Hallie Malley. Hallie, my operations manager, who makes all these happen. I'd be lying if I said it was me. That'd be a huge lie. It's Hallie. She actually makes this whole speaker series happen, as well as many other things at the Food Nutrition Innovation Institute. So with that, thank you all for joining. I know we're gonna keep having people come in, but that's fine. I think with that, we are going to turn it over to Namali and have you present, correct? And then Namali, Hallie, if you want to spotlight both of us for a second. Namali, I think we're going to have you speak, and then afterwards, hopefully have time for conversation, right?
Cool. Yeah. Perfect. And feel free to use the chat too, so we can get back to those questions if you want to put them there, so you don't have to keep them in your brain. That works too.
Yeah, that's a great point, to use the chat, you guys. So if you have a thought that comes up, because we'll do questions at the end, but thought that comes up, a comment, whatever, it's really helpful to also gather those insights, because anything you don't get to say during this, we will download that whole chat and give it to Namali as well. So those insights, connections, contacts, etc., for her along the way are helpful too. So with that, Hallie, you can get rid of me. We're going to give this to Namali totally and take it away.
Thank you. I want to say hi to all of you that I recently got to spend time with at our meeting, and thanks for so many of you for showing up, and thanks to Hallie and Katie for curating this incredible collaborative group. I enjoy it every time I'm with you. And I was excited to be able to share a little bit of my perspectives. I see some people from my own working group from our recent meeting in Annapolis, and so some of you may have heard me talk about some of these themes, but hopefully I'll bring a little bit of some new perspective to the conversation too. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm a pediatrician. I founded the Dr. Yum Project. Our nonprofit's mission is to help families and communities overcome the barriers to eating well. And around Virginia, where we started, I'm kind of known as a pediatrician in the kitchen. I'm also known as Dr. Yum. And, I've been doing this for about 24 years now. And early in my career, I was just kind of looking for ways that I can help my patients get healthier, and looking for the, great prevention methods, and ended up sharing a lot of recipes because I saw how many of my patients were suffering with diet-related symptomatology. No matter where they are on the BMI curve or where they were in socioeconomics, I just saw a lot of diet-related symptomatology. And so I started passing out recipes. It sounds so simple, but I saw the power of that and then ended up here in the kitchen. And it is where I really got to see the power of food and how children respond. And so I found my way into a community kitchen at a church in our town where I would have cooking classes and we would use fresh Virginia grown produce to create international recipes and teach kids the power of food. And it was addictive. I loved it. We had such a great time. And I loved it so much that I decided to quit my job in the general pediatrics practice where I was. And I started my own practice because I saw the power of food so clearly. And so I started my own practice where I could really have fun with food. And my exam rooms were all themed by fruits and vegetables. I had a sweet pea room for the newborns, and I had an orange room and a broccoli room, and it was so much fun. But the thing I was able to do was really create this part of my practice, which was the teaching kitchen. This was the fun side where I really got to dive into what's going on with kids and families and food, and how can we uplift families with the power of food. And so for 10 years, I lived in this space between the practice and the teaching kitchen. And my friend Fred from the farmer's truck, he called it my human lab, where I got to really look at what are those barriers that families are facing when it comes to nutritious food. And then how can our nonprofit create programs, classes, recipes, apps that can fill those voids and help overcome those barriers. And so for 10 years, we tried everything in the kitchen and it was a ton of fun. I'm just going to give you a little snapshot of some of the fun we had in our kitchen. We also had a garden too. So it was a great place to bring kids and show them how food grows and how delicious local food can be. We had just a marvelous 10 years in this kitchen. Some of the experiences that we created in our classes, we had a first foods class where we taught families how to encourage feeding development and how to think outside of the baby food jar and think about how they can also include fresh, delicious, culturally inclusive recipes into their baby's repertoire. We did a lot of collaboration and partnership with local nonprofits. This is one example of our early classes that we did with Big Brothers Big Sisters. We taught kids the importance of a healthy breakfast through classes like our pajama party. We also had a breakfast with dads club, and we would teach the kids how to make breakfast with their dad and how they could get outside of the cereal box and create these recipes that were really nutritious and different. We had holiday parties where we would celebrate Halloween. We would celebrate with making broccoli Christmas trees. I mean, we tried everything and we had so much fun and learned so much. We even taught adults. We had canning classes. We had curry. This is a curry class that we did called Curry in a Hurry. We invited local chefs occasionally to come by. So this is Joy Crump. She's a celebrity chef. She's been on Top Chef. She would come in and share some of her wisdom. And then we did a lot with families. We had a class called Parenting for Wellness, where we would teach families how they can make meal times easier by learning how to cook and understanding how kids can be part of that process. So it was just a ton of fun. And what I realized is in those 10 years, I was really sitting in this intersection between pediatric medicine, culinary medicine, and food as medicine. And it was just such an exciting and unique place to sit. And I really wanted today to share some of the insights that I gleaned from those years sitting in this very beautiful space. And so my main message is that children really have the power to transform food systems. And I saw this every day in these fun and exciting ways that I interacted with families, with children around food. And we've seen that in the programs that we have created from that human teaching lab that are now national programs. We're seeing that on many levels. And so that's what I'm hoping to share with you today. But I think it's important to understand two things. If we really want children to harness that power to transform food systems, we need to understand two really important things. One is we need to understand child development. And I'm going to really dive into this point in a lot of different examples of this, but I think there are a lot of initiatives out there that involve children, and I can't underscore enough how important it is that we understand child development when we are interacting with kids around food. And then the second point is that we must understand a child's unique and powerful place within a family. And I think that's something that we who sit in this space of culinary medicine and food as medicine can really be thinking about when we're thinking about interventions and how we can help individuals. We need to consider the child's unique and powerful place in the family. So let's go back to development. Development is something as a pediatrician I think about all the time. And it is interesting because it is something that we think about in regards to other things besides feeding quite a lot. And reading is one of those things that we think about. If you think about how we teach children to read, we have trained teachers using proven techniques. We have parents reinforcing skills at home. We have libraries full of a variety of books so that if kids don't like certain books, maybe they can like the style or genre of books that really spark their interest in reading. And we understand that for some kids, that development may be very quick and very easy, but for other kids, it may take a lot longer and it may take a lot more patience. And for those kids for whom it may take longer, we develop a plan for those kids. We might have an educational plan. We may have supports for those kids. We may engage a reading specialist. But at no point would we call that child a bad reader, right? We would commit to helping that child read no matter how long it took, and we would not label or stigmatize a child. So I want us to think about that example. Feeding is also a developmental process. So it actually involves a complex coming together of fine motor skills, gross motor skills, oral motor skills, language, cognitive skills, and taste training. It's very complicated development that's happening when we're teaching kids to eat. And it takes quite a lot of practice. So on average, it takes a child about 10 to 15 times before they may accept a new food. And the range can be anywhere from 2 to 47 tries. And 47 tries is a lot of tries, particularly when we're thinking about families and communities facing hardships around food insecurity. That is a lot to ask for a family. So on average, an average American family may only expose their child to a food 3 to 5 times before they decide that they don't like it. And often, unfortunately, those children get the label of picky eating or a picky eater. And it's really, if you think about it, it's almost the same as calling a child a bad reader, right? We would never do that because they're learning to read. And so I see this every day, this picky eater label being applied to children. And it's one of the things, it's sort of my mission is to remove that label of children on children. So when we're thinking about teaching our youngest children to eat, I just wanted to make you aware of a great initiative with Partnership for a Healthier America. They have a white paper that is really looking at the evidence around early vegetable introduction. Their campaign called Veggies Early and Often was launched in 2021, and we joined that campaign. And if you're interested in the earliest feeding development, we developed a great set of resources. The Dr. Young Project and Partnership for a Healthier America brought together a group of child health and nutrition experts to create these free feeding guides They do live on the Dr. Yum and PHA's website. And they go through feeding development from 0 to 2 years when we're really establishing that foundation. And what we've done in this series is we've really focused on how do we get those foundational skills from the ground up, and how do we teach parents how to do that in a proactive way, their gross motor, fine motor, oral motor skills. So if you're interested in that, that is a resource that's out there that we worked really hard on, and it answers a lot of frequently asked questions about early feeding. So when I think about feeding development, I think about the learned development of feeding being a three-legged stool. Okay. So in the first leg, there is the way a child's brain functions. So the way that they sense, the way they process those sensations, their learning, emotions, and memories. If you can imagine a child with autism or any neurodivergence, that may challenge their feeding development, right? So there are a lot of kids who struggle with difficulties in feeding development because of brain function. There are also a lot of kids that can struggle because of the way their body functions, right? Their anatomy, their motor skills, the way their organs function. Kids, for instance, who are premature and they may have difficulty with acid reflux, digestion. So that can also set kids up for difficulties in feeding development. So if we think about all the kids out there, that is a lot of kids who may be struggling with their development of feeding. There's also a third leg of the stool, which is their environment. So kids need a consistent environment in order to learn skills. So if we are thinking about food insecurity, for example, where kids may not have consistent access to a variety of nutritious foods. They may not have housing with kitchen equipment that's necessary to provide that consistent mealtime exposure. This can also derail feeding development. And so that can make it very challenging. So if we're thinking about all of the kids who may be at risk for difficulty in feeding development, that is a lot of kids. And I say that because so much of the usual way that we talk about food and think about food and expose kids to food with, for instance, farm to school movements, growing foods, these are important things that we can expose kids to, but it may not be enough for these kids who have difficulty in feeding development. And if you think about just one leg of the stool can derail feeding development, but often one leg of the stool may trip up other legs of the stool too, right? So if a child is experiencing hunger, that may affect the way that they sense hunger, the way they process those sensations. And it could also, if we're experiencing prolonged hunger, could affect cognition and learning, especially in that 0 to 2 age group. It also may affect the way that they process or they digest, right? So even their motor function, their digestive function can be derailed. And so that can really result in 3 very shaky legs of the stool, right? So this is something that we think about a lot. So what if we could reimagine the way we teach kids to eat? This is sort of what we're doing in our work. What if we trained the teachers using proven techniques that help all children? We taught kids we taught parents how to reinforce those skills. We made sure that cafeterias were exposing kids to a variety of healthy, nutritious foods, and that we understood that there is a timeline that can be really different for each child. For some kids, it will be short. For other kids who may have a shaky leg of those stools, it might be longer. And what if we had a plan for how to help those kids progress rather than labeling them as picky eaters? What if we really committed to getting them to the finish line and helping them to develop a strong foundation of eating skills? And that's what we've kind of done in our approach with one of our programs, Dr. M's Food Adventure. We brought together a team of experts, and we really leaned heavily on our speech language pathologist, Coach Mel, who really has taught us all how we can consider feeding development in nutrition education. And so we start with really a multisensory experience around food, with an adventure a month around a fruit or vegetable. We really engage kids using all of their senses, because a lot of kids may not be ready to try a food out of the gate. They may need some time using their other senses to get comfortable. And then, are you guys still seeing my slides? You are? Okay, great. Um, and then we're teaching them how food grows, in our experience. And we are teaching kids about the superpowers of food. So really teaching kids what food does for their body. And I want to give you an example. Some of you may have heard me tell this story, but one of the kiddos that we heard about from a teacher was having a lot of challenges with engaging with lessons, but she loved learning about the superpowers of food. She loved that vitamin K helps your cuts and scrapes, and vitamin C helps you fight germs. And one day she was running in class and she fell down and scraped her knee. And all of a sudden she popped up and she said, "Wait a minute, I need a kiwi." And her teacher looked at her quizzically and said, "Why do you need a kiwi?" And she said, "Because it has vitamin K and it will help my cuts and scrapes." And so the teacher called her mom. They got a bag of kiwis at home, and every day she would eat a kiwi and she would, monitor the progress of her knee healing. And that is food as medicine. Kids understand these concepts. And so we made sure to include that in our curriculum. There's a lot that we do to help teachers to develop and implement the lessons. So the lesson plans are very clear. We do a lot of extension activities for teachers, giving them ideas of how they can engage the senses in other art, literature, movement, science, community, and around the world. Here are some kids doing a seed counting lesson where they are guessing how many seeds are in the pepper, but they're also really experiencing the smells and sights and sounds of peppers as they do this experiment. And they're doing a lot of fine motor work and a lot of language development. So this is part of the experience that we give kids, and it really does make such a difference. We also are very excited to teach kids about foods from other cultures. And kids really, we talk a lot about culturally inclusive food, but kids really have so much plasticity in this area too. And they're really open to learning about other tastes and cultures. And there's so much they can learn from each other through each other's food. So we do this great thing. We've been doing this for years. We have food passports where we can stamp in the kids' passports, which country or culture they're visiting through their food journeys. And it really, kids love to try food so they can get that stamp. And then we always have a Coach Mel tip. Our speech language pathologist knows so much about feeding development and where some certain kids will get tripped up. And so there's always a tip for them. And what we see through this cooking experience is there's a lot of social emotional development that's happening. There's a lot of resilience that kids are building and a growth mindset around food. We actually use this Yum score to teach kids how to practice food. So it's not that they don't like food, it's that they don't like it yet. And as they try food in those 10 or 15 tries, they experience that food can go from a not yet to a super yum. And kids use this practicing language in the classroom all the time. We love to see that when we're visiting. And this is really, the part of the lesson the kids love is the cooking part. This is culinary medicine starting at the youngest of ages, right? So we're teaching kids how to prepare these foods and how to enjoy working together to prepare foods. And the parents are so excited to see how their kids can actually be helpers in the kitchen and how they can really enjoy the experience of cooking together, which sometimes can feel like a drudgery, and it can be hard to manage small children and getting those meals on the table. But when they see that the kids actually can participate, it is very empowering. There's a lot of development that also happens when kids are cooking. And I just wanted to show you, we partner with the National Head Start Association, and over the years, we've seen how many early Head Start programs have joined the adventure. So these are toddlers in early Head Start classrooms across the country that are also cooking in their own ways. They're experiencing these foods, tasting, washing, mashing, stirring. So yes, even 18 months, 2-year-olds can be part of the culinary medicine wave, right? Another story I wanted to share with you is really kind of this intersection between culinary medicine and food as medicine. Cooking does really change health outcomes, and this is just one example. We had a teacher who told us about a student of theirs who was really having difficulty with behavior and with his health. He was a very picky eater, and he did not eat a lot of nutritious foods. He really relied on a lot of bland, fiberless foods. As a result, he suffered from chronic constipation, and the family was traveling an hour to see a pediatric gastroenterologist who had the child on some medications and a regimen. And unfortunately, because of his constipation, he was also having urinary issues, which is very common with kids with chronic constipation. So he was wetting the nap mat at nap time. And as a result, he wasn't able to have a great nap. And so probably as a result of that, he was experiencing a lot of behavior issues in the classroom. So during the course of the year of doing the cooking lessons, he finally once was making these pumpkin energy bites, their favorite recipe. And the teacher noticed him rolling out the bites, but he never would take a taste. But he did smell, and the teacher noticed that he smiled. And so she said, I wonder what it would taste like. And so he took a bite. And after taking a bite, he rolled another ball and he ate it. And the teacher said, whoa, this is a breakthrough. So they called home and said, just like every month, we're sending home the recipe, but this one I think you really should make because he really likes it. And sure enough, mom got the ingredients, pumpkin, chia seeds, oats, really high fiber dates. And wouldn't you know, he started to have more regular bowel movements. And within the next couple of weeks or months, he was able to get off of his medication, and he was able to experience a full nap. And his behavior slowly but surely improved, and he was able then to engage in more of the lessons and ended up trying a lot of the foods the rest of the year. So this again is culinary medicine meets food as medicine meets pediatric medicine right in the classroom. So there's a lot of data to show that cooking with kids matters. This is an example of some data that we collected in Alabama, in Northern Alabama, and a Head Start program. We looked at about 600 children, and we rated their feeding behaviors. Teachers rated their feeding behaviors in terms of food fussiness and food enjoyment. And we saw a significant improvement in food fussiness. So kids were enjoying tasting foods more. They were not deciding that they didn't like a food before trying it, right? They were more engaged in food. And we also found an increase in food enjoyment. So the fact that they liked food more, they were interested in food, they enjoyed the experience of eating meal times together. That improved significantly over just an average of 7 lessons. We also looked at their body mass index and found that in healthy weight kids with BMI between 5th and 85th percentile, there was virtually no change in their weight status. But in the underweight category, we saw a 26 percentile point increase. And in the high weight category, we actually saw a 17.6 percentile point decrease. So interesting that this normalization of BMI actually happened on both sides of the BMI curve. So from a systems perspective, I wanted to share some data from our local food school district. Food Services Director Brian Kiernan is sort of a celebrity in our area. He has a district with largely kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch, but he loves to introduce these kids to scratch cooked meals and does his very best to do that every day with his team. He was noticing, though, that he was having trouble getting the kids to try the food. And so 10 years ago, he partnered with us to bring our food adventure into the pre-K space. And what he found was that the kids were actually trying more foods. And so he decided this idea of practice is really important. And so when the kids in pre-K are practicing broccoli during broccoli month, I'm going to put broccoli on the menu several times, not just in pre-K, but I'm going to do that in the upper elementary, the lower elementary, the middle school, and the high school. And what happened over, here's an example of what it looks like at his pre-K building on the morning of a Dr. Yum lesson. The food is ready to go to all of the classrooms, and they've done a really good job. After the first year, they decided to bring it into the special needs classrooms too. This little bitty is actually one of my patients who participated in this program. And what they found was over 10 years since introducing that the food adventure and this practicing mindset into the whole district, that the percentage of food dollars spent on produce has gone up significantly. And Brian sits on statewide food services councils. And what he has told us is that he actually buys more produce per head now than any school in Virginia. So this year, we're actually doing a pilot in kindergartens. We can really make sure that almost all of the kids who are going through into high school are exposed to this developmentally informed practicing mindset. He's also seen breakfast participation increase and lunch participation increase over these 10 years as well, which is sort of, music to his ears as a food services director. So my second point, that was child development, right? So my second sort of take home is we must understand a child's unique and powerful place within a family. We know that sharing meals is important. So 2 to 5 year olds' likings for vegetables and their vegetable consumption was predicted by eating approximately the same foods as parents. It's something that we should strive for. Modeling also so very important. Interestingly, when mothers model healthy eating at 1 year, there's a higher frequency of vegetable consumption at 2 years. But the reality is the percentage of US children who eat the recommended servings of vegetables per day is only 10%. And the percentage of adults who eat the recommended servings of vegetables per day is 9.4%. So we could be doing better as adults in modeling this, love for nutritious foods and preparing these nutritious foods. Unfortunately, what I have seen is that because we are not addressing child development and we're seeing so many picky eaters, this really can affect how the family eats, right? When we talk about food as medicine and culinary medicine, we often think of adults in a silo, but adults are often feeding kids and grandchildren. And so we have to consider what might be happening. This is just an example. This is a study that was done in 88 families with siblings, and 64% of them actually reported that they had a picky eater. And the way that they defined picky eating was a little bit different, but 64, that's a lot of families. And what the families reported is they often adjusted their meals for the picky eater, right? So they're either making separate meals, they're limiting ingredients, they're changing their cooking style, they're serving only foods that the child accepts. And so the diet quality in families who have these picky eaters, which is most families, may be compromised. So we really need to be thinking about how we approach that issue of picky eating in families. How do we understand it as an entity, as a piece of development, and how can we get past it so we can really bring up the nutritional quality of the entire family. And it is possible. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples as we end the presentation of how we have seen that happen. But just this is a great picture from my friend Melanie, who talks about this relationship that she sees in feeding therapy, how a child's relationship with food can often affect a family's relationship with food and the way a family behaves around food, which can really disrupt family dynamics quite profoundly, especially in kids with really severe, feeding issues like ARFID, for example. That can affect family behavior and the family's relationship with food, and then create a spiral where it affects the child's relationship with food. So I wanted to give you some examples of we can really leverage this place of where children sit and the power they have in a family if we understand feeding development. Here's just a couple of examples. This is a picture from one of my baby food classes in the teaching kitchen. I love teaching families how they can introduce flavor and multicultural recipes. And I often introduce this lentil curry in this baby food class. And parents are so excited to see how their kids really respond to these international cuisines, and they're very proud of their babies that are foodies. What I saw often in this class is grandmothers, grandparents coming in and really paying attention to the recipes and how their children and grandchildren were responding, and changing the way that they cook at home as a result of wanting to have these experiences for their baby. One grandmother came to me and said, that lentil curry that you made is our Sunday dinner now. And this is the power of children, right? Here's another example from our preschool work. These are some teachers from King George, Virginia at the YMCA. We piloted our food adventure back in 2013 in the King George YMCA. It's a small rural community where the teachers were really excited about bringing the food adventure to the daycare at the YMCA. But the parents were very skeptical. And a lot of them said, you know what, I saw that tangy broccoli salad recipe and my kids are not going to eat it. And the teachers, they trained with us and they kept their chins up and they implemented the program. And within a couple of months, they told us, you know what, that tangy broccoli salad is coming in the lunchbox now. These kids aren't just enjoying it in the classroom, they're going home and they're making it at home and they're packing it. And what happened over the next couple of years was really just extraordinary. Kids were making these recipes at home, and families were getting on our website, looking for new recipes, talking amongst each other. Did you try this Dr. Yum recipe? Did you try that Dr. Yum recipe? And then a couple of years later, when we were seeing the younger siblings coming through, they were so receptive to the lessons because they were already Dr. Yum kids. They had seen their older siblings going through the program. They had watched their excitement. They had tried the recipes at home. So it really, over the course of a couple of years, changed the way these families were thinking about food and cooking more. And then my last example really has to do with modeling. We have a program at the Dr. Yum Project called Touch Points. It's a lifestyle program that teaches pediatricians how to teach healthy lifestyle behaviors according to the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines on childhood obesity. It is a weight neutral, empowering, fun, family-centered program where we teach kids a set of 20 lifestyle behaviors, and we show families how to do that as a family. And this is a family that was one of the first to do touch points in my practice with me. And this mom was just such a trooper. She's a single mom. She really wanted to go through this program with both of her kids. And I told her how important modeling was. And at the end of the year, I invited her to do a talk with me at a public health conference in Virginia. And she laughed with me that day about how she has made such progress herself. She literally had nothing to wear to the presentation. She had to dig into some of her old clothes because without even realizing, she had transformed her own health. She lost weight, she was feeling better, she was more energetic, and she wasn't really even trying. She was just sort of parallel to the kids, doing the same sorts of things that we talked about, the way that we packed snacks, the way that we put together our meals. And she herself experienced this wonderful health journey. So, the power of children, right? When we show families how important that modeling can be, it really can make such a difference. So, I'm just going to end so we have some time for questions. But to say, if you take away anything, think about these interventions that we consider around children. We really need to be thinking about their development and how to make sure that we're not leaving so many of these kids behind in our interventions. And we need to be thinking about also where kids fit in this paradigm of food as medicine, and culinary medicine. So I'll just break there in case you all have any questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Namali.